Final photographs of historic ocean liners and seafaring vessels offer a haunting glimpse into the atmosphere that lingered in the final moments before disaster struck. These photographs resonate with an eerie atmosphere, forever frozen in time. This video will examine 30 final photographs of renowned ocean liners and maritime vessels, uncovering the unsettling stories they silently preserve. RMS Titanic was an ill-fated British ocean liner, destined to live a short career. Commencing her maiden voyage on April 10, 1912, Titanic briefly docked in Ireland the next day to embark more passengers before heading out into the Atlantic Ocean. On April 11, 1912, at 1:30 p.m., as Titanic was departing Ireland, this final photograph of the mighty liner was captured. Titanic struck an iceberg 3 days later and sank under 3 hours. This chilling final photograph stands as a testament to maritime safety regulations before they were forever improved. RMS Empress of Ireland was a proud British-registered Canadian-operated ocean liner. On May 28, 1914, at 4:30 p.m., Empress of Ireland departed Quebec City, bound for Liverpool. As the liner was departing, this final photograph of the Empress was captured. Less than 10 hours after this photograph was captured, Empress of Ireland was involved in a collision and sank in under 15 minutes. The photograph's French caption,
Course à la mort, 28 mai 1914,
translates into English as Heading for Death, May 28, 1914. This dramatic final photograph foreshadows what would become the greatest peacetime maritime disaster in Canadian history. RMS Lusitania was a British ocean liner capable of sailing at remarkably high speeds. On May 1, 1915, at 12:20 p.m., Lusitania departed New York City, bound for Liverpool. Approximately 10 minutes later, this final photograph of Lusitania was captured by a crew member on board the British battleship HMS Glory. Shortly afterwards, Lusitania disappeared into the horizon. 6 days later, Lusitania was struck by a torpedo that had been fired by a German U-boat and sank within 20 minutes. This ominous final photograph represents the ship's imminent destruction and the international outrage her loss would spark during the First World War. SS Endurance was a steam-powered sailing ship that was requisitioned to participate in the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition of 1914 to 1917. Led by the famed Antarctic explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, Endurance became trapped in dense pack ice in early 1915. Although the ship's crew tried to release Endurance, this attempt proved futile. Shortly before 5 p.m. on November 21, 1915, this final photograph of Endurance was captured. Afterwards, Endurance succumbed to the crushing pressure of the ice and disappeared beneath the waves. This unsettling final photograph, which depicts the ship destroyed beyond salvation, serves as a reminder of how ambitious expeditions could descend into catastrophe. SS Principe Umberto was a luxurious Italian ocean liner. During the First World War, Principe Umberto was converted into an armed merchant cruiser. On the night of June 8, 1916, Principe Umberto was struck by a torpedo that had been fired by an Austro-Hungarian U-boat. At around 9:05 p.m., after breaking into two pieces, a rescue ship captured this final photograph of the sinking liner. Minutes later, Principe Umberto disappeared beneath the waves. This haunting final photograph of the ship serves as a monument that captures the final moments of a once proud liner, becoming the greatest loss of life at sea during the First World War. HMHS Britannic was originally envisioned as a luxurious British ocean liner. However, during the First World War, Britannic was converted into a hospital ship. Although Britannic was protected under war rules, fate is a joker, as it had different plans for the mighty liner. On November 19, 1916, a nurse named Sheila Macbeth Mitchell captured this final photograph of Britannic as the ship lay in the harbor at Naples. 2 days later, Britannic struck a mine and sank in under an hour. This final photograph of the ship stands as a reminder of how the Great War did not discriminate, regardless of the rules meant to shield a ship from harm. SS Georgic was a British cargo ship built to replace an earlier vessel that had disappeared under unknown circumstances. On December 10, 1916, Georgic was intercepted by the German raider SMS Mo. Georgic's crew was ordered to disembark the vessel before Mo scuttled the cargo ship. Georgic's final moments were recorded on camera. This haunting final frame of the ship before the footage cut out stands as a symbol of a vessel destined to disappear beneath the waves, much like the lost predecessor she was built to replace. RMS Arcadian was a British ocean liner. During the First World War, Arcadian was converted into a troop ship. On April 15, 1917, Arcadian was struck by a torpedo that had been fired by a German U-boat. At 5:48 p.m., just 2 minutes before the ship sank, this final haunting photograph of Arcadian, with her stern high in the air, was captured. This final haunting photograph of the ship stands as a solemn memorial to all the vessels violently lost during the Great War. RMS Calgarian was a proud passenger ship that rivaled RMS Empress of Ireland. During the First World War, Calgarian was converted into an armed merchant cruiser. On the afternoon of March 1, 1918, Calgarian was struck by a torpedo that had been fired by a German U-boat. 5 minutes later, at 4:55 p.m., the British warship HMS Poppy captured this final photograph of the sinking liner. About 40 minutes later, Calgarian disappeared beneath the waves. This eerie final photograph of the ship stands as a somber reminder that even the fiercest rivals can ultimately meet the same tragic fate beneath the sea. RMS Carpathia was a British ocean liner renowned for having once rescued hundreds of souls stranded at sea. On July 17, 1918, Carpathia was struck by a torpedo that had been fired by a German U-boat. At around 10:55 a.m., this final photograph of the once proud liner was captured. 5 minutes later, Carpathia disappeared beneath the waves. This final eerie photograph of the once great ship serves as a somber reminder that even heroes may fall. SS Justicia was a large British ocean liner. During the First World War, Justicia was converted into a troop ship. On July 19, 1918, Justicia was struck by several torpedoes that had been fired by many German U-boats. Despite the ambush, Justicia remained resolutely afloat until she finally lost her fight with buoyancy the following day. As the ship began plummeting to the bottom on July 20, 1918, this final photograph of the sinking liner was captured. This haunting final photograph stands as a solemn reminder that even giants may fall. RMS Lancastria was a large British ocean liner. During the Second World War, Lancastria was converted into a troop ship. On June 17, 1940, Lancastria was caught in an air raid orchestrated by German aircraft. Lancastria was bombed and sunk with a devastating loss of life. At 4:10 p.m., just 2 minutes before the ship sank, this final photograph of Lancastria lying on her side was captured. This final haunting photograph of the liner stands as a memorial dedicated to the fourth greatest loss of life at sea on board a single shipwreck. HMS Hood was a powerful British battlecruiser. On May 24, 1941, while Hood was patrolling Atlantic waters, a nearby warship captured this final photograph of the battlecruiser sailing in the distance. Hours later, Hood was ambushed and sunk by the German battleship Bismarck. Hood sank with the loss of nearly all of her crew members. This final ominous photograph endures as a silent tribute to the largest battlecruiser ever constructed and as a memorial to all those who went down with her. Bismarck was a mighty German battleship. After sinking the pride of the British fleet on May 24, 1941, an extensive hunt was launched to track her down. On May 27, 1941, Bismarck was finally located and attacked by several British warships. Shortly before the end, a British warship captured this final photograph of Bismarck ablaze and sinking in the distance. Moments later, Bismarck sank to the bottom of the Atlantic with the loss of most of her crew members. This haunting final photograph serves as a grim reminder that the hand which strikes first is not always spared from the final blow. MV Armenia was a Soviet passenger ship. In November of 1941, Armenia was hastily converted into a hospital ship to assist with the evacuation of civilians trapped in Nazi-occupied territory. Early that month, this final photograph of Armenia in her hospital ship livery was captured. On November 7, 1941, just a few days after her conversion, Armenia was sunk by a German aircraft with a devastating loss of life. This ominous final photograph of the liner stands as a memorial dedicated to the third greatest loss of life at sea on board a single shipwreck. SS Maysan Maru was a Japanese landing craft depot ship. In December of 1942, Maysan Maru was commissioned. This photograph was captured at the time of her commissioning. This remains the only known photograph of Maysan Maru. On November 17, 1944, after having encountered several close calls throughout her career, Maysan Maru's luck finally ran out as the ship was torpedoed and sunk with a heavy loss of life. This only known photograph of the ship serves as a reminder of how suddenly luck may run out. RMS Windsor Castle was a luxurious British ocean liner. During the Second World War, Windsor Castle was converted into a troop ship. During the early hours of March 23, 1943, Windsor Castle was struck by a torpedo that had been launched by a German aircraft. Windsor Castle remained resolutely afloat until she finally lost her fight against buoyancy later that day. As the ship began her final plunge, this final photograph of the sinking liner was captured. This unsettling final photograph highlights how the war spared neither elegance nor legacy. SS Tamatsu Maru was a Japanese landing craft depot ship. On August 18, 1943, Tamatsu Maru was proudly launched. This photograph was captured during her launch. This remains the only known photograph of Tamatsu Maru. On August 19, 1944, just a year and 1 day after her launch, Tamatsu Maru was torpedoed and sunk with a devastating loss of life. This only known photograph of the ship stands as a memorial dedicated to the 9th greatest loss of life at sea on board a single shipwreck. Roma was a formidable Italian battleship. On September 9, 1943, while Roma and other Italian warships were secretly en route to surrender to the Allies, the fleet was intercepted by German aircraft. The German aircraft, who were notified of the planned surrender, were ordered to sink Roma and the warships. Roma was bombed and critically damaged, causing the ship to capsize, break into 2 pieces, and sink. Shortly before Roma sank, this final photograph of the ship broken in 2 pieces and sinking was captured. This final photograph of the sinking battleship lingers as a warning of how secrecy, once exposed, can invite catastrophe. IJN Musashi was a powerful Japanese super battleship. On October 24, 1944, Musashi was ambushed by waves of American aircraft. For 9 relentless hours, Musashi was struck by dozens of bombs and torpedoes. At around 7:30 p.m., this final photograph of the super battleship was captured. Minutes later, the once feared Musashi was gone. This final photograph of the dying super battleship stands as a testament not only to the second most powerful battleship ever built, but also to the immense capabilities of human engineering. IJN Shinano was a feared Japanese supercarrier. On November 11, 1944, while Shinano was performing her sea trials, this final photograph of the carrier was captured. This remains just one of 3 known photographs of Shinano. On November 29, 1944, just 18 days after this photograph was captured, Shinano was torpedoed and sunk by an American submarine. This foreboding final photograph of the supercarrier serves as an eerie reminder that even the most powerful inherit vulnerability. MV Wilhelm Gustloff was a large German cruise ship. Towards the end of the Second World War, Wilhelm Gustloff was requisitioned to participate in a large-scale evacuation mission. On January 30, 1945, at 12:30 p.m., as Wilhelm Gustloff was departing port with thousands of refugees on board, this final photograph of the ship was captured. That night, Wilhelm Gustloff was torpedoed and sunk with a devastating loss of life. This ominous final photograph of the ship stands as a memorial to the greatest loss of life at sea on board a single shipwreck. MV Goya was a mighty German freighter. Towards the end of the Second World War, Goya was requisitioned to participate in a large-scale evacuation mission. On April 4, 1945, as Goya lay docked in Danzig Bay, this final photograph of the ship was captured. 12 days later, Goya was torpedoed and sunk with a devastating loss of life. This ominous final photograph of the ship stands as a memorial to the second greatest loss of life at sea on board a single shipwreck. IJN Yahagi was a Japanese light cruiser. In April of 1945, Yahagi was assigned to a top-secret mission to defend Okinawa. On April 7, 1945, while sailing to Okinawa, Yahagi was ambushed by American aircraft. At approximately 2 p.m., just 5 minutes before sinking, this final photograph of Yahagi was captured as the light cruiser was listing heavily to starboard. This unsettling final photograph reflects how swiftly secret operations can unravel into disaster. IJN Yamato was a powerful Japanese super battleship. In April of 1945, Yamato was requisitioned to participate in a top-secret operation that consisted of sailing to Okinawa Island to defend it from falling into Allied hands. On April 7, 1945, however, while sailing to Okinawa, Yamato was ambushed by American aircraft. Within less than 2 hours, Yamato was struck by dozens of bombs and torpedoes. At 2:23 p.m., this final photograph of the super battleship as she was blowing up was captured. This final photograph of the dying super battleship stands as a testament not only to the most powerful battleship ever built, but also to the immense capabilities of human engineering. SS Andrea Doria was a luxurious Italian ocean liner. On the night of July 25, 1956, Andrea Doria was involved in a collision with another vessel. Andrea Doria resisted her fate for 11 hours before finally losing her fight against buoyancy. At 10:08 a.m. the next day, just 1 minute before sinking, this final photograph of Andrea Doria was captured. This haunting final photograph lingers as a chilling reminder that elegance is never permanent. TSMS Laconia was a fine Greek cruise ship. On December 22, 1963, Laconia caught fire and was abandoned. Although attempts were made to tow the ship to shore, Laconia developed a severe list on December 29, 1963. As the ship began rolling onto her side, this final photograph of the ship was captured. Shortly afterwards, Laconia capsized and sank. This final eerie photograph serves as a dark caution that pleasure can swiftly turn into peril. SS Edmund Fitzgerald was the pride of the Great Lakes Fleet. Shortly before leaving port on November 9, 1975, at 2:15 p.m., this final photograph of the mighty Fitz was captured. Throughout the evening of the next day, Edmund Fitzgerald was battered by violent waves. Her hull failed, and the ship broke in two, sinking within seconds and leaving no survivors. This photograph stands as a lasting tribute to the ship's crew and to all who were lost on the Great Lakes throughout history. SS Admiral Nakhimov was a Soviet cruise ship. On the afternoon of August 31, 1896, this final photograph of Admiral Nakhimov was captured as the ship lay docked. That night, after leaving port, Admiral Nakhimov was involved in a collision with another ship. The collision critically damaged Admiral Nakhimov, causing the liner to sink within minutes. This final ominous photograph of the ship stands as a symbol of one of the many factors that ultimately contributed to the downfall of the Soviet Union. MTS Oceanos was a Greek cruise ship. On the night of August 3, 1991, structural failure and poor maintenance caused Oceanos to begin flooding. After realizing that the ship was sinking, every soul on board was safely evacuated. After disembarking every soul on board, a helicopter recorded Oceanos' final plunge. This haunting final frame of the ship before the vessel disappeared beneath the waves stands as a stark lesson in the cost of neglect. Final photographs of historic vessels hold a haunting power, depicting them in their final moments just before history overtakes them. Suspended between survival and loss, these photographs preserve vessels as they were moments before their steel surrendered to the sea. In their silence, they remind us how quickly certainty can disappear and how suddenly an ending can arrive.